I'm Madison, 32 female. I live in a small but cozy apartment in the city, filled with old books and the quiet satisfaction of a life I built myself. As an archivist for the city's historical society, my job is to preserve the past and piece together stories from forgotten documents, a skill that would soon become unexpectedly useful in my own life. This is the story of how my family's casual cruelty pushed me to uncover a secret they had buried for decades, and how I used their own history to reclaim my future. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Growing up, I was the quiet moon to my cousin Olivia's dazzling sun. Our family orbited her, basking in her glow, while I was often left in the penumbra, a background detail in the grand family portrait. Olivia was 2 years younger, but she had a talent for being the center of attention that I, with my nose always buried in a book, never learned to cultivate. While I was praised for being dependable and sensible, adjectives that feel like consolation prizes, Olivia was celebrated for being vivacious and charming. Our birthdays, which fell on the same day, became the perfect annual showcase of this disparity. Mine, the elder by 2 years, was always an afterthought, a brief acknowledgement before the main event, Olivia's celebration. My Aunt Brenda, Olivia's mother, was the chief architect of this dynamic. A real estate agent with a shark smile and an obsession with appearances, Brenda saw her daughter as a reflection of her own success. Olivia's life was meticulously curated for public consumption. She was a lifestyle blogger, a profession that seemed tailor-made for her. Her social media was a glossy magazine of brunches, boutique shopping sprees, and vacations to picturesque locales, all funded by what Aunt Brenda called savvy investments, though everyone knew it was just Brenda's commission checks. My mother, Carol, a part-time administrator who was perpetually overwhelmed, never stood up to her sister. She would offer me a weak, apologetic smile and say things like, "Brenda just gets so excited, you know how she is," as if her sister's force of nature personality was an uncontrollable weather event. My mother's passivity was a quiet sort of betrayal that stung just as much as Brenda's overt favoritism. The dynamic was cemented in 1,000 small cuts. At family gatherings, my achievements, graduating with honors, securing my competitive job at the Historical Society, were met with polite nods before the conversation inevitably shifted to Olivia's latest brand collaboration or her follower count. When I bought my first car, a reliable used sedan, Aunt Brenda remarked, "Oh, that's practical. Olivia is thinking of getting a convertible, something with a bit more personality." Every choice I made was framed as sensible but boring, while Olivia's were exciting and aspirational. My grandmother, Eleanor, was the only one who seemed to see the imbalance. A retired librarian, she lived in the old family house on the outskirts of town, a place filled with the scent of aging paper and lemon polish. She was my quiet ally. She never openly contradicted Brenda, which wasn't her way, but she would find moments to pull me aside. "Don't let them dull your shine, Maddie," she'd whisper, pressing a classic novel into my hands. A well-tended garden is quieter than a firework, but it lasts a great deal longer. Her home was my sanctuary. We'd spend hours in her dusty, treasure-filled attic, where she'd tell me stories about our ancestors, showing me sepia-toned photographs and delicate, handwritten letters. She taught me to see history not as a collection of dates, but as a series of personal stories, of choices and consequences that echoed through generations. It was from her that I inherited my love for the past and my meticulous, patient nature. As we grew older, the birthday issue became more pronounced. Joint parties in our childhood gave way to separate, but unequal, acknowledgments. My 20th birthday was a small family dinner at a local chain restaurant, after which everyone rushed off to the surprise party Brenda had thrown for Olivia's 18th. For our 25th and 23rd, I received a gift card and a few texts, while Olivia was gifted a trip to Italy, the photos of which dominated the family group chat for weeks. I learned to expect disappointment, to build a wall around that specific date on the calendar and plan my own quiet celebration, a trip to a museum, a nice dinner with a friend, a new book to lose myself in. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was above the need for such validation. I convinced myself that their focus on Olivia was a reflection of their own superficiality, not my lack of worth. But deep down, the quiet, persistent message was CL. I was less important. I was forgettable. This year, for my 32nd birthday, I had braced myself for the usual quiet dismissal. I had no idea it wouldn't be quiet at all. It would be a public declaration, a final, careless twist of the knife that would finally shatter the fragile peace I had built for myself. The morning of my 32nd birthday started with a silence that felt heavier than usual. I woke up and checked my phone, a knot of familiar dread tightening in my stomach. No calls, no texts, not even the perfunctory happy birthday. Message from my mother that usually arrived like clockwork at 8 a.m. I scrolled through our family group chat. The last message was from 3 days ago, a picture of Aunt Brenda's prize-winning roses. Nothing since. I told myself it was fine. They were busy. People forget, it was just another day. I went through my morning routine, trying to shake off the growing chill of being utterly forgotten. I had taken the day off work, a small gift to myself. I planned to visit a new exhibit at the art gallery and then treat myself to lunch at a cafe I'd been wanting to try. As I was getting ready, my phone buzzed. A spark of hope flickered. It was a notification from a social media app. My heart sank as I read the text preview on my screen. It was a post from Olivia. I opened the app and there it was. A professionally shot, sun-drenched photo of Olivia, standing in a beautifully decorated garden, holding a bouquet of peonies and smiling her dazzling, perfect smile. She was wearing a new, expensive-looking dress. Behind her, a banner read, "Happy 30th birthday, Olivia." The caption, written in her signature effusive style, gushed with gratitude. Feeling so blessed and overwhelmed with love on my big 30. Huge thank you to my amazing mom, at Brenda Sells Homes, for planning the most incredible surprise birthday brunch. Woke up to this beautiful scene and all my favorite people. My heart is so full. Birthday girl 30 flirty and thriving family first. I felt the air leave my lungs, a surprise brunch, that morning. The photo was timestamped just an hour ago. I started scrolling. It wasn't just one photo, it was an album. There was a shot of the whole family, my mother included, gathered around a long, beautifully set table. They were all raising champagne glasses, their faces beaming. My mother, Carol, stood right next to Aunt Brenda, her arm linked through her sister, a wide, carefree smile on her face that I hadn't seen in years. There were photos of the custom cake, the elaborate floral arrangements, the mountain of presents wrapped in shimmering paper. Every detail was perfect, curated, and broadcast for the world to see. The comments section was a flood of well wishes. "Happy birthday, gorgeous. You deserve it all. Your family is goals." And then a comment from my own mother. "It was such a perfect day for our perfect girl, so happy we could celebrate you. Love you to the moon and back, sweetie, our perfect girl." The words twisted in my gut. I looked at the date on the post again just to be sure. It was our birthday, not just hers, but ours, yet there was no mention of me. Not a single comment, not a tag, not an acknowledgement that another family member was also marking a milestone. It wasn't just that they had forgotten me. It was that they had so loudly, so publicly, so joyfully celebrated someone else on the very day they had erased my existence. It was a complete and total invalidation. My hands were shaking as I closed the app. The quiet hurt I'd learned to manage over the years had morphed into a hot, blinding rage. This wasn't a simple oversight. A surprise party of that scale, for a Sunday brunch, would have taken weeks of planning. There would have been invitations, secret phone calls, group texts that I was deliberately excluded from. My own mother was in on it. She had smiled in my face just last week, asking about my plans for the weekend, knowing full well she would be attending a lavish party for my cousin while giving her own daughter the silent treatment. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was the casual, unthinking ease with which they had dismissed me that hurt the most. I was so insignificant that it hadn't even occurred to them to hide it. I sank onto my sofa, my plans for the day forgotten. The silence in my apartment was deafening, a stark contrast to the laughter and celebration that filled Olivia's photos. I thought of all the years I had made excuses for them, all the times I had told myself to be the bigger person, to not let it bother me. I had accepted the role they had given me, the quiet, sensible, low-maintenance daughter and niece. I had never demanded more, and in return they had given me less and less, until finally they had given me nothing at all. The wall I had built around my heart didn't just have a crack in it, it had been demolished. And in the rubble, something new was beginning to form, a cold, hard réseau. LVE, they had shown me exactly how much I mattered to them. It was time I returned the favor and showed them what a forgotten person could be capable of remembering. The days following my non-birthday were a blur of numb anger. My phone remained silent until Tuesday afternoon when my mother finally called. Her voice was breezy, completely oblivious. "Hi, sweetie. Sorry, it's been a crazy few days. Brenda needed my help with a big event she was planning." I let the silence hang in the air before I responded, my voice flat and cold. "The big event for Olivia's birthday, you mean? I saw the pictures. It looked lovely." There was a sudden, sharp intake of breath on her end of the line. Oh, Maddie, I am so sorry. It completely slipped my mind. With all the running around for Olivia's surprise, your day just got lost in the shuffle." Lost in the shuffle? My 32nd birthday, her firstborn daughter. The excuse was so flimsy, so insulting, it was almost laughable. "It didn't slip your mind, Mom," I said, the coldness in my voice hardening into steel. "You made a choice. You chose to celebrate her and ignore me. Just be honest about it." "That's not fair," she stammered, her voice taking on a defensive, whiny tone that I knew all too well. "Brenda put me on the spot. You know how she is. She just gets so carried away." "And you just go right along with her," I finished for her. I didn't have the energy to argue. I ended the call, leaving her sputtering apologies into the void. Aunt Brenda and Olivia sent texts later that day, filled with fake sweet apologies about the total mix-up and how they felt just awful. I deleted them without replying. The lines had been drawn. The polite fiction of our family was over, at least for me. My anger needed a direction. I spent the weekend at my grandmother Eliner's house, seeking refuge. I didn't tell her the specifics of what had happened. I didn't want to put her in the middle, but she seemed to understand. She saw the new hardness in my eyes and simply gave me a hug, her small frame a surprising anchor of strength. "Sometimes you have to clear out the weeds to let the flowers grow," she said cryptically, patting my hand. On Sunday, needing a distraction, I went up to her attic. It was my favorite place in the house, a sanctuary of stored history. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light from the circular window, illuminating stacks of old trunks, forgotten furniture draped in white sheets, and boxes upon boxes of family memorabilia. As an archivist, this was my natural habitat. I decided to do something I'd been meaning to do for years, properly organize and catalog everything. It was a task that would require focus and precision, a perfect antidote to the emotional chaos swirling inside me. I started with a large, leather-bound trunk in the corner, one I knew contained old photo albums and documents from my great-grandparents' generation. As I carefully lifted out stacks of letters tied with faded ribbon, my fingers brushed against a false bottom. My curiosity piqued. I worked my fingers into the seam and lifted a thin wooden panel. Underneath lay a small, locked metal box, rusted at the hinges. It looked ancient. I brought it downstairs to my grandmother. "Eliner, what is this?" I asked, placing it on the kitchen table. Her eyes, usually so clear, clouded with a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. Apprehension? Sadness? "Oh, that," she said softly. "I'd almost forgotten about that. It belonged to your great-grandmother, Evelyn, my mother. She told me never to open it. She said it held a history best left buried." "Why?" I pressed, my archivist's instincts now fully awake. A locked box with a warning, that was the holy grail. Eliner sighed, a long, weary sound. My mother was a very proud woman, and my father, he was a good man, but he made a mistake a long time ago. a mistake my mother chose to erase. She looked at me, her gaze sharp. Your Aunt Brenda has her grandmother's pride, you see. The obsession with appearances, with having the perfect family, it didn't start with her. My heart started to beat a little faster. This felt important. Do you have the key? She nodded slowly, walking over to an old roll-top desk. She retrieved a tiny, ornate brass key from a hidden drawer. She held it in her palm for a moment before handing it to me. What you find in there, Madison, is a part of our story that was deliberately cut out. Maybe it's time it was pasted back in. I took the box back up to the attic. The key turned stiffly in the lock and the lid creaked open. The box was filled with yellowed documents, letters, a birth certificate, a baptismal record, and a small black diary with a broken clasp. I picked up the birth certificate first. The name on it was Arthur Jennings. The date of birth was October 12, 1938. The mother's name was Evelyn Jennings, my great-grandmother, but the space for the father's name was blank. Read on. The place of birth was a home for unwed mothers in a neighboring state. My great-grandmother had a child before she married my great-grandfather, a son, a brother to my grandmother Eleanor. I had an uncle I never knew existed. I opened the diary. The entries were sporadic, written in a tight, frantic script. They told a story of a hidden pregnancy, of shame and fear. She wrote of being sent away by her parents to have the baby in secret, and of the agonizing decision to give him up for adoption to a family that could provide him with a name and a future that wouldn't be tainted by the scandal of his birth. The last entry was heartbreaking. I have given away a piece of my heart. May God forgive me, and may my son forgive me. No one must ever know. Our family's good name is all that matters. I sat back in the dusty silence of the attic, the documents spread around me. This was the secret. The pristine family image that Aunt Brenda was so desperate to uphold was built on a foundation of lies and omissions. This buried history, this forgotten person, felt like a mirror of my own experience. I, too, had been made to feel invisible, like a piece of the family story that didn't matter. But unlike my great-uncle Arthur, I wasn't going to stay lost. I held the truth in my hands. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, exactly how I was going to use it. The discovery of my great-uncle Arthur lit a fire in me. The initial shock gave way to a focused, methodical determination. This was no longer just about a forgotten birthday. It was about a forgotten life. My family, particularly Aunt Brenda and my great-grandmother Evelyn before her, had built their identities on a carefully curated image of perfection. They had pruned the family tree of any branch they deemed unsightly. I was just the latest branch to be sawed off. My mission now was twofold: to find what happened to Arthur and to use his story to expose the hypocrisy that had defined my life. My professional skills as an archivist became my greatest weapons. I started with the few details I had. His name, Arthur Jennings, his birth date, October 12, 1938, and the name of the home for unwed mothers. The first step was to find his adoption records. Adoption laws, especially from that era, are notoriously strict to protect privacy. However, many states have opened access to original birth certificates for adult adoptees or their direct descendants. I was a direct descendant of his mother. It was a long shot, but it was a place to start. I spent my evenings and weekends buried in online genealogy databases, public records archives, and state legal forums. I filed a formal request with the Vital Records Office in the state where Arthur was born, providing a copy of my birth certificate, my mother's, and my grandmother's, establishing a direct maternal link to Evelyn Jennings. I attached a carefully worded letter explaining my purpose was for family history and genealogical research. The process was slow and bureaucratic. Weeks turned into a month, and the waiting was agonizing. While I waited for the official channels to work, I pursued other avenues. I cross-referenced the names of the adoptive parents mentioned vaguely in Evelyn's diary, a Mr. and Mrs. Miller, with census records from 1940. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. There were thousands of Millers, but I narrowed the search to the county surrounding the maternity home. I spent hours scrolling through digitized records, my eyes straining at the faint, cursive script. Finally, I found it. A household headed by a George and Helen Miller, with an adopted son listed as Arthur Miller, age 2. The birth year matched. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was him. With his new name, a whole world of information opened up. I found Arthur Miller in school yearbooks, a handsome young man with my grandmother's eyes. I found a local newspaper article from 1956 announcing he had enlisted in the U.S. Army. I tracked his military service records, which led me to his postings overseas and eventually his honorable discharge in 1960. He had settled not far from his last post, in a small town in California. The digital trail led me to an online obituary. Arthur Miller had passed away 5 years ago at the age of 77. A wave of sadness washed over me. I would never get to meet him, this uncle I never knew. But the obituary was a goldmine of information. It mentioned he was a beloved high school history teacher for over 30 years, a respected community member, a husband, and a father. He was survived by his wife, Sarah, and a daughter, Dr. Amelia Miller. A daughter, I had another cousin. My hands trembled as I searched for Dr. Amelia Miller. It wasn't hard to find her. She was a professor of American history at a well-regarded university in California. Her staff profile picture showed a woman in her late 40s with a warm, intelligent face. She had the same determined set to her jaw that I saw in old photos of my grandmother. The irony was not lost on me. The abandoned branch of the family had produced not one, but 2 historians. It was in our blood. Just as I was debating how to make contact, a thick manila envelope arrived in the mail. It was from the State Vital Records Office. My request had been approved. Inside was a certified copy of Arthur's original birth certificate and attached to it the final adoption decree. It listed the names and address of George and Helen Miller. It was the confirmation I needed. I now had irrefutable legal proof. Holding the documents, my plan began to solidify. It wasn't enough to just know the truth. My family needed to confront it. And not just confront it, but do so in the most public and undeniable way possible. Aunt Brenda and Olivia lived their lives for an audience, curating their image on social media and within their social circles. Their reputation was their most prized possession. I decided I would use their own stage to pull back the curtain. The annual family summer barbecue was coming up in a few weeks. It was Aunt Brenda's signature event, a meticulously planned affair to which she invited not just family, but neighbors, business associates, and anyone she wanted to impress. It was the perfect venue, but I needed one more piece to complete the puzzle. I needed to speak to Amelia. I spent a full day composing an email to her. I explained who I was, laying out the story of my discovery in a calm, factual manner. I attached scanned copies of the documents, the birth certificate, the diary pages, the adoption decree. I told her I wasn't asking for anything, only that I wanted to share a piece of her father's history that she may not have known. I ended the email by saying, "Your father was a history teacher, and I am an archivist." It seems we share a belief in the importance of the past. My family chose to erase him, and I feel a profound need to correct that record. I hope this information brings you some measure of peace, as it has for me. I hesitated for a long moment, my finger hovering over the send button. This could go horribly wrong. She could think I was a lunatic or worse, an opportunist. Taking a deep breath, I clicked send. The investigation was over. The next phase was about to begin. 2 days after I sent the email, Amelia replied. Her response was cautious but kind. She confessed she'd always known her father was adopted, but that he had never known the names of his biological parents and had long since made peace with it. He had a happy, loving childhood with the Millers. My email, she wrote, was like a ghost walking through her door, shocking, but not entirely unwelcome. She was fascinated by the documents and asked if we could schedule a video call. The call was nerve-wracking, but Amelia immediately put me at ease. She was warm, articulate, and had a wry sense of humor. We talked for over 2 hours, first about her father and then about our lives. We discovered an uncanny number of shared interests, from a love of historical biographies to a fondness for rainy-day British mystery shows. It felt less like meeting a stranger and more like finding a missing piece of myself. I told her about our family, about the dynamic with Brenda and Olivia, and about the birthday incident that had started my search. She listened patiently, a look of thoughtful sympathy on her face. "So, my biological grandmother's family is obsessed with appearances," she summarized with a small, ironic smile. "That explains a lot. My dad always used to say that the loudest people often have the emptiest rooms." By the end of the call, we had forged a genuine connection. I carefully laid out my idea for Aunt Brenda's barbecue. "She uses this party to show off her perfect life, her perfect family," I explained. "I want to present her with a gift, a celebration of our real family history, something she can't ignore or sweep under the rug." Amelia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My father believed that history, good and bad, deserved to be known. He would have wanted his story told. I'm in. What do you need from me?" Her support was the final piece I needed. Together, we refined the plan. It would be a multimedia presentation, a short, powerful tribute that would leave no room for denial. I spent the next 2 weeks consumed by what I internally called the Family History Project. I digitized all the documents: Evelyn's diary entries, Arthur's birth certificate, the adoption records, his military service papers, and newspaper clippings about his teaching career. Amelia sent me a folder of beautiful family photos. Arthur as a young boy, his wedding day, him holding a baby Amelia, family vacations, and a recent, lovely photo of him and his wife, Sarah, smiling in their garden. Using my professional skills, I wove these elements together. I created a high-quality, professionally designed photo album. The cover was embossed in gold. Leaf with the title, "The Jennings Miller Legacy, A Family History." Inside, each page was a chapter of Arthur's life, told through images and meticulously reproduced documents. It was a tangible, undeniable record of the man they had erased. But the centerpiece of the plan was the video. I spent hours editing a short, 5-minute film. I combined the photos Amelia sent with scanned images of the documents, set to a piece of poignant classical music. I asked Amelia to record a short voiceover. She spoke beautifully about the father she knew, a kind, dedicated teacher who had touched hundreds of lives. She didn't speak with anger or bitterness, but with a simple, powerful dignity that made the story even more compelling. The video ended with a photo of Arthur and Aliner's shared mother, Evelyn, and then faded to a simple text on a black screen. "In loving memory of Arthur Miller, 1938-2015. A son, a husband, a father, a teacher. A story worth telling." The final touch was the invitation. Amelia and her mother, Sarah, agreed to fly in for the weekend of the party. They booked a hotel, and I arranged to pick them up from the airport. Their presence was crucial. This wasn't just about documents and photos, it was about introducing the living, breathing results of that long-ago secret. I also prepared a gift for my grandmother, Aliner. One evening, I sat with her and gently told her everything I had found. I showed her the photos of Arthur and told her about Amelia. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at the pictures of the brother she never knew she had. "He has my eyes," she whispered, tracing his face on a photograph. My mother, she carried that secret like a stone in her heart her whole life. She thought she was protecting us, but all she did was build a wall. I told her that Arthur's wife and daughter were coming to visit, and that I wanted her to meet them first, away from the drama of the party. A quiet, private reunion. Her tears of sorrow turned to ones of gratitude. The day before the party, I picked up Amelia and Sarah from the airport. Meeting them in person felt like coming home. Sarah was as kind as her daughter, with a gentle strength about her. That evening, I took them to Aliner's house. The meeting between my grandmother and her brother's family was one of the most moving moments of my life. They talked for hours, sharing stories and looking at photos, bridging a gap of 80 years in a single evening. Aliner finally had her brother back, not in person, but through the legacy he left behind. As I drove home that night, the beautifully wrapped photo album and a USB drive containing the video sitting on the passenger seat, I felt a calm I hadn't experienced in months. This was more than revenge. It was a restoration. It was about making my family whole again, whether they wanted to be or not. Aunt Brenda was about to host a celebration of her perfectly curated family. I was about to give her an anniversary gift she would never forget: the truth. Aunt Brenda's backyard was a stage set for suburban perfection. White tents dotted the manicured lawn, bistro lights were strung between 100-year-old oak trees, and a catering staff bustled about with trays of champagne and canapés. The air buzzed with polite chatter and the smooth sounds of a jazz trio. Olivia, in a flowing white dress, moved through the crowd like a minor celebrity, her laughter tinkling as she documented every moment for her followers. My mother hovered near Brenda, playing the role of the loyal lady-in-waiting. It was the exact scene of curated domestic bliss that Brenda strived for, and the perfect backdrop for it to all come crashing down. I arrived with Alina, Amelia, and Sarah. Our entrance caused a small ripple. Brenda's smile faltered for a fraction of a second as she saw me with 3 strangers, but she recovered quickly, gliding over with her arms outstretched. "Madison and Alina, so glad you could make it. And you've brought friends," she said, her eyes flicking over Amelia and Sarah with practiced appraisal. "Aunt Brenda," I said, my voice steady and clear. "This is Sarah Miller and her daughter, Dr. Amelia Miller, their family." Brenda's smile froze. "Family? I don't believe we've met. Are you from David's side?" she asked, referring to her husband. "No," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "We're from our side, the Jennings side." Before Brenda could process this, I turned to the small, raised platform where the jazz trio was playing. I had spoken to the band leader earlier, slipping him a generous tip to borrow his microphone for 5 minutes. He gave me a nod. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, stepping onto the platform. My voice, amplified, cut through the chatter. The yard fell silent. Every eye turned to me. I could see the panic blooming on Brenda's face. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my aunt and uncle's anniversary," I began, my voice ringing with a confidence that surprised even me. My Aunt Brenda loves family and tradition more than anyone I know. She believes in celebrating our history and upholding the family name. And it's in that spirit that I wanted to offer a special anniversary gift, a project I've been working on to honor a part of our history that has been overlooked for far too long. I nodded to a friend I'd enlisted, who was standing discreetly by a large television screen Brenda had set up to display a slideshow of her family photos. My friend hit play, and the screen flickered to life. The opening notes of the classical music filled the stunned silence. The first image appeared, a sepia-toned photo of my great-grandmother, Evelyn. Then, the scanned image of Arthur's birth certificate, his name clear and bold. A collective gasp went through the crowd. I saw my mother's face go pale. Brenda looked like she had been turned to stone, her champagne flute held halfway to her lips. The video continued, telling Arthur's story photo by photo, document by document: his adoption, his childhood, his military service, his wedding to Sarah, the birth of Amelia, his long, respected career. Amelia's calm, dignified voiceover narrated her father's life, a life of purpose and love lived completely outside the narrow world Brenda had constructed. The video ended with the final dedication. The screen went black. The silence in the yard was absolute. No one moved. I took a breath and spoke into the microphone again. Evelyn Jennings, my grandmother Alina's mother and my Aunt Brenda's grandmother, had a son she gave up to protect the family's reputation. His name was Arthur. He was my grandmother's brother. And though he is no longer with us, his wonderful wife, Sarah, and his daughter, my cousin, Dr. Amelia Miller, are here with us today. I gestured to Amelia and Sarah, who stood beside Alina, their expressions composed and dignified. All heads swiveled towards them, then to Brenda. Her face was a mask of fury and humiliation. Olivia looked utterly bewildered, her phone forgotten in her hand. My mother looked like she was about to faint. "Brenda, you've spent your whole life curating a perfect image," I said, my voice losing its formal edge and becoming intensely personal. "An image so perfect, there's no room for people who don't fit, people like your uncle, people like me." I looked directly at my mother. "You went along with it. You both thought I was forgettable. You erased my birthday and you celebrated hers," I said, nodding towards a shocked Olivia. You tried to erase me just like your grandmother erased her own son. But history has a way of coming back. Truth doesn't stay buried forever. I stepped off the platform and walked to Brenda, holding out the beautifully wrapped photo album. Happy anniversary, Aunt Brenda. Here is the rest of our family. I thought it was time you met them. She stared at the gift as if it were a snake. She wouldn't take it. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was a low, vicious hiss. How dare you? How dare you bring this trash into my home and try to ruin my party? Ruin it? Amelia stepped forward, her voice calm and firm. We're not trash. My father was a good and decent man, a man who deserved to be known by his family. The only thing being ruined here tonight is the fantasy you've been living in. That was it, the dam broke. Brenda began shouting, not at me, but at my mother. This is your daughter, you let this happen? Guests began to murmur, their polite smiles replaced by looks of shock and fascination. They were witnessing the perfect facade crumble in real time. People started to discreetly make for the exits. The party was over. The truth was out. And as I watched the chaos unfold, I felt nothing but a quiet, profound sense of release. The shadow I had lived in for so long had finally, irrevocably, been banished by the light. The fallout from the party was immediate and spectacular. Brenda's carefully constructed social world imploded overnight. The story of the secret uncle and the public confrontation became the juiciest piece of gossip in her community. Her attempts at damage control were futile. She tried to frame me as a disturbed, vindictive niece, but the quiet dignity of Amelia and Sarah, combined with the undeniable proof I had presented, made her version of events seem like the desperate rantings of a woman whose lies had been exposed. Her husband, a quiet man who had long been steamrolled by her personality, was mortified. Their perfect marriage became strained to the breaking point. Olivia's reaction was one of pure shock. Her entire identity was built on the foundation of being the family's golden child. The revelation that this foundation was a lie seemed to short-circuit her brain. She retreated from social media for weeks, her lifestyle blog silent. When she finally re-emerged, her content was different, less glossy, more subdued. The effortless charm was gone, replaced by kind of brittle uncertainty. Our relationship, already superficial, ceased to exist. We didn't speak again. The most complicated reaction came from my mother. She called me the day after the party, her voice a mixture of anger and a deep, rattling shame. She accused me of humiliating her, of airing our family's dirty laundry in public. I listened patiently until she ran out of steam. I didn't humiliate you, Mom, I said, my voice devoid of malice. I just told the truth. You were humiliated by your own choices. You chose to stand by Brenda and erase me. You chose to ignore your own daughter. That's not my fault. It's yours. For the first time in my life, I didn't soften the blow or try to manage her feelings. I simply stated the facts. It was a painful conversation, and it ended without resolution. Our relationship is still fractured. We speak occasionally, the conversation's strained and superficial. She is trying, in her own clumsy way, to rebuild a bridge, but she has not yet been able to offer the one thing I need: a genuine apology that acknowledges her role in the years of neglect. Maybe she never will. I've come to accept that I can't change her, but I no longer need her approval to feel whole. The true aftermath, the one that truly matters, was not about the family I broke, but the one I built. In the weeks and months that followed, my connection with Alina, Amelia, and Sarah blossomed. Amelia and I discovered we were more like sisters than cousins, kindred spirits connected by a shared love of history and a resilience we inherited from a long line of complicated women. We talk on the phone every week, and we're already planning a trip together to visit the town where our shared ancestor, Evelyn, grew up. Sarah, my great-uncle's widow, has become a source of gentle wisdom in my life. She sends me letters, the old-fashioned, handwritten kind, filled with stories about Arthur and encouragement for my own journey. And Alina, my grandmother, is transformed. The weight of her mother's secret, a burden she didn't even realize she was carrying, has been lifted. Meeting Amelia and Sarah has given her a new lease on life. She has a piece of her lost brother back, and her joy is radiant. Our bond, already strong, is now the bedrock of my life. I recently visited Alina, and we went up to the attic together. The metal box that started it all was sitting on a small table. Alina had placed a framed photo of Arthur next to it. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "for years, this attic felt like a place of secrets and endings. Now, it feels like a place of beginnings." She was right. My life feels like it's just beginning. The rage that fueled me has cooled, replaced by a deep and abiding peace. I am no longer the quiet moon in someone else's orbit. I am my own center of gravity. I reclaimed my story, not by shouting louder than them, but by speaking a truth they had tried to silence. My family tree has been redrawn. Some branches have fallen away, withered from their own poison. But a new, stronger branch has grown in their place, one rooted not in secrets and lies, but in acceptance, love, and the enduring power of a story that finally has been told.